And hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Television. Chapters is the television show that profiles authors, editors, and publishers in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. I'm Eliot Parker. It's great to have you with us. We are joined today by mystery writer Daniel Foster, and we're going to talk about his writing career and his latest book, Sidewinder, a very interesting tale about two characters who get themselves into all kinds of trouble. And we're delighted to have Dan Foster with us here today to talk about that and other things related to writing. So Dan, welcome to Chapters. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit first, some biographical information, where you're from, what you do aside from writing, what are some of your hobbies and interests, those kinds of things.
Sure. Well, I was born in Tennessee, but raised here in West Virginia for most of my life, so I'm as close to dyed-in-the-wool as it comes, I think. I work drafting right now. I've done organ donation recovery. I've done a little bit of everything. So, and a lot of that plays into the books. I have a hard time staying satisfied with the job for a long period of time, and so the variety lends color to my writing.
Very good. Excellent.
Yeah.
And prior to Sidewinder, was there any other kind of writing that you had done, or are there other things that you work on aside from writing novels? Do you do other kinds of writing projects or other kind of genres you're interested in?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm writing 3 books currently. 2 of them are fantasies. One of them is a sequel to this, which is a mystery. I published a couple books with another publisher several years back. They were actually kids' books. So writing is my true north. I love it. And other than romance, I think I've tried my hand at just about everything. I haven't published everything, which is proof that God loves you, that I haven't published everything I've written, but I have tried a little bit of everything. So.
Excellent, very good. So what's your writing process like? Do you write every day? There's certain times of the day that you write. Do you write on paper first, type first? How does your writing process work?
Well, again, back to True North, and True North doesn't obey anything like meal times or bedtime or anything else. So I try to write in the morning if I can, but it's not unusual for me to get up at 3 a.m. because an idea randomly hit me while I was asleep. So writing rules the roost. Whenever it comes, it comes. And I say, yes, sir, and I get up and I go with it.
Very good. Did you write on the computer, write on notebook paper? How does that work?
Yeah, on the computer. I'm always on the computer. The paper doesn't have a backspace key.
Yeah,
so.
Very, very good, very true. So I want to talk a little bit about your book, Sidewinder, that just came out, because this is just an interesting story with a lot of interesting characters, but it focuses primarily on Thomas and Kate. So tell us a little bit about Thomas, tell us a little bit about Kate, and how do they get involved with one another?
Okay. The way Thomas and Kate met is something that you don't actually find out until Vertigo, the next book in the series. But when Sidewinder opens, Thomas is gone. He's disappeared. Kate thought that she had the best relationship in the world with her husband. She loved him to death, thought he loved her to death. But then a year prior to the beginning of the novel, he vanished. No explanation, no reason whatsoever. So Kate is a newly minted PI when the book opens, and this book is her attempt to figure out why he did what he did. He was a homicide investigator. He disappeared in the middle of his last 3 cases. No one knows why, and they were never solved. So
when we see Kate at the beginning, one of the things I think that is so interesting, really about her, especially at the beginning of the book, is that you reveal so much for us in layers. You give us details without having to really spell it out for the reader word for word. We get a sense of her personality, we get a sense of her temperament, we get a sense of kind of the way she views things early on, which I think was a unique approach at the beginning of the story. Is that something you set out to do, or is that just something that sort of came to you through the process of establishing her as a character?
The best way I can answer that is to give you just a brief clue on how I actually write a book, because this is going to sound a little odd. I only write about the first third of the book. The characters write it from there. See, my job as an author is not to write a story. My job is to create characters and give them a setup. And then if I've done my job properly and actually built the characters and given them real personalities and thoughts and feelings of their own, then I don't have the right to control them any more than I'd have the right to control you. So about halfway into the book, I lose control. And the characters are making their decisions and they're doing what they're going to do. The ending I would have had in mind for Sidewinder wasn't nearly as fun as the one the characters created. So what you're seeing there as far as the initialization of Kate has to do with honestly, her self-discovery in the book, and thereby my discovery of her, if that makes sense.
That makes perfectly good sense. So it sounds to me like as the book goes on, after you get past that 1/3, the characters kind of become sort of a part of your subconscious and actual conscious. I mean, we hear a lot of writers talk about that. They can hear their characters talking to each other, even when they're not writing. Just when writers are eating breakfast or in the shower or whatever, they can still hear those characters conversing. It sounds like that's kind of a similar process for you. That they're always driving the story forward, even maybe when you're not thinking about them.
Yes, we try not to admit these things on television because it makes it sound like we need to be locked up. But yes, you can. There are times you could almost have a conversation with one of them across your dinner table, and that's a little scary. But
Absolutely, very good. One technique that you use in Sidewinder that I thought was interesting is we kind of alternate back and forth between Kate and Thomas as the book goes on. And I know that some writers call that braiding or braidling, where you use that technique. Tell us a little bit about that as a structure, and why you decided to use that, and how you think that really helps us understand them and understand what's going on to them in the book, in the story.
Okay. The first book that the first book that I published was a kid's book. It was not braided. But every adult book that I've written, and by adult I simply mean not children's novel, that I have written has been braided. There's a couple reasons for it. One, I tend to write in that manner, in that I tend to create scenes one at a time based on the emotional flow within the scene. So in other words, the way that I construct the story initially lends itself to these nice little hand-carved boxes that individual pieces of the story fit into. So that gives me the opportunity to braid right off the bat without having to recreate anything. When you braid a story, you give yourself the ability to develop multiple characters simultaneously in the development of the plot. In simpler language, all that means is it gives me the ability to develop two perspectives on the same events. As you'll notice in Sidewinder, both Thomas and Kate's perspective dovetails at the same moment in time in the story. And then from there on, you have one perspective telling the story.
So eventually we do see that those perspectives merge, and,
yes.
we have that one perspective. Something else that was unique about this is because of Thomas's his history as a homicide investigator. You've got some other characters in here who we'll talk about, Holden and some others in just a minute. But you set this up in sort of a small rural Appalachian town.
Yes.
And I could see these characters functioning in Chicago or L.A. or New York City. They have some of those big city kind of personalities and big city mannerisms and approaches. But why did you choose to put it in a small Appalachian town when you've got these sort of larger than life characters and what happens to them and everything? Why did you choose that small town as opposed to the big city?
That's a really fun question, actually. First off, boring answer, write what you know. Secondly, because scene is everything. I used to love, there was a movie called Bringing Up Baby that had Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant in it. Maybe it was made in the early 40s, I don't recall. But the movie was funny to watch for me, and largely just because those two people have such strong personalities. Put them together with a script of sorts and let them bounce off each other for as long as they want to. When you have these characters that have very large, swelling personalities, putting them against a backdrop like the city, it almost works a little too well in certain ways, because then the city is competing with the energy that the characters generate. So when you put them in small town America, it makes certain nuances of the character a little more enjoyable for the reader, in my opinion. So
yeah, and I think too you have that element of as you're saying, the city sort of as the backdrop, kind of swallowing up the storyline. You could envision this happening in a big city, these kinds of things. I don't want to give too much of what happens away, but you could envision what happens to Thomas and Kate happening in a big city. But yeah, in a smaller Appalachian town, this would stand out. I mean, in a town of 4,500 people, let's say, for example, this would be the talk of the town.
This would be the headline.
Yeah, this would pull everybody in. Everybody would be talking about it. Some neighbors would be involved. So yeah. I think it does work well in that small background. One of the things we also see in the book, as we go through and as Kate sort of investigates what happened, we get some references to to some earlier parts of their life. Thomas when he was in college, Kate during her childhood. In terms of that, was it difficult to reveal just a little bit, but not too much about them at various times?
The answer is yes. It definitely was. We had to, because in the editing process, heavens, I couldn't tell you how much of that particular thing we removed from Sidewinder. There were several reasons for it. One, because you don't want to reveal too much. The only thing that is more powerful than what you say in a book is what you don't say, what you choose to leave out, what you choose to leave to the reader's imagination, what you choose to hint at and allow them to build. And secondly, when I was writing Sidewinder, I hadn't laid out the plot arc for the rest of the series. They're going to be, I have plot arc for Sidewinder, Vertigo, and Halcyon, and there's enough left over for Valkyrie, a fourth book if people really enjoy the plot line that well. They seem to be so far. But yes, you have to, so I had to edit it down, one, not to reveal too much ahead of time, and two, because during the writing of Sidewinder, there were certain things that I didn't know solidly about the overall plot arc. So
interesting, very good. So you learn a lot through that process as
absolutely.
You go. Tell us a little bit about two other characters who I caught my attention, I found interesting, Holden and Miller.
Holden and Miller.
Who are they, and what is their role in what goes on with Thomas and Kate's story?
Oh, okay. Who are they? I'm going to cop out on this by telling you that no character is ever completely fake, and since there are no innocents here, I can't protect the innocent, but I'm going to protect myself by just saying no character is totally made up and leave it at that. Miller is a guy with a conscience, but without the guts to do anything with it. Miller is regret. Miller is a mistake. Miller is a desperate attempt at redemption. And maybe he finds it, maybe he doesn't. That's up to the reader to decide. Holden wants to be Thomas, but he just can't. Thomas is a homicide investigator. He is so good at what he does. He's brilliant. He has a gorgeous wife, Kate. He's egotistical. Holden does match him on that. Holden does have Thomas's ego. But Holden, oddly enough, he actually plays the role of being a tragic character in this story. Because most of the scenes you see Holden, there's something that's either going to make you laugh or make you roll your eyes. But in reality, Holden never found who he was. And as a result, he's never able to settle, never able to be happy. And so that's actually the reason for a lot of the humor. That's why he butts heads with Thomas so much. So it's funny but unfortunate at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So who are some mystery writers that inspire you or have influenced you? Maybe either ones you like to read or ones whose work has inspired you or given you ideas for writing Sidewinder and some of your other books that you've got coming up?
Sure. Poe, first off, Edgar Allan Poe, he created the genre, and there is, there's a lot of criticism leveled against the old masters, but that's like looking at the Model T and criticizing it against the modern Ford. Those who actually initiated what we have built on for over a century, those people deserve recognition, and in a lot of ways, sometimes the people who did it first still did it best. So looking at Poe gives you the ability to understand mystery and even a bit of the beginning of noir in its most elemental form. And anything that's in its most elemental form is, in a way, in its most pure form. Another name would be Dean Koontz. Now, he's not necessarily a mystery writer, but he does write mysteries occasionally, and a lot of his books have mystery worked into them. And Koontz has the most beautiful way of using language that I think I've ever seen. He's a true master, an absolute painter with words. And the way, not necessarily that he builds a mystery, although he's good at that, but the way that he makes his mystery beautiful is something that I emulate. So.
And two very good writers, as you mentioned, for different reasons and in different ways, Koontz and Poe. Very interesting. I wanted to go back to the question I asked you a moment ago about the rural sort of small town, Appalachian town where the story takes place. We also get some crime investigation as part of the story. How did all of that happen in terms of, was there a lot of research that you had to do to figure out how it all works, and what would a homicide detective do in this circumstance? What would be the first thing they would ask, or the second thing they would do, or how the conversations would go? Because I think it sounds exactly like it would, or like we would expect it to. Did you have to do a lot of research on that? Did you talk to some cops or some homicide investigators? How did you get it right? Because you did a great job with it.
Yes, actually, thank you. I appreciate that. There is a lot of research involved in this. this, and it's kind of funny though, because when you're researching for someone like Thomas, there is a lot of very nitty-gritty detail work that goes in, talking to police officers, talking to investigators. There are books actually that have been written specifically for writers on how to run police procedure and investigation. Lee Laughlin wrote one actually that's excellent. But then there are other characters, for example, Holden, who was not good at his job, and Bill Watterson, who used to write Calvin and Hobbes, once said that writing for Calvin was simple because he didn't need to know any more than a lazy 6-year-old. So for people like Holden, the same holds true.
That's true. I had never thought about that, but that is so true. But yes, he has very much a lot of those 6-year-old tendencies.
Yeah.
And what makes Thomas so interesting is he's got a lot of those cop characteristics too. You know, a lot of cops that you talk to and that do this kind of work, you know, that they are sarcastic, they can be crass, they can be sort of a the glass half empty kind of person, but
Sure.
they're very devoted and very dedicated to
Yeah.
their job when it comes right down to it. And we see so many of those characteristics in Thomas, which I think shows that he's a great character, but also a lot of good research done on your part.
Glad you enjoyed him.
So tell us a little bit about the other books that you've got coming up. You mentioned you've got a sequel or a couple sequels lined up for Sidewinder. Tell us about those. Where are they in the process of drafting, and what's going to happen in book 2 after Sidewinder concludes? Are we done with Thomas and Kate, or are we done with Holden and Miller? What's going to happen to some of those folks without giving too much away?
Okay, without giving too much away, you haven't even seen the edge of it in Sidewinder. There is something going on here that orchestrated everything that happened in Sidewinder. Sidewinder appears to be very self-contained. The mystery begins, rolls, and then it ends. But in reality, you didn't even get a look at what was happening. What's happening is much larger. It's being orchestrated by a larger puppet master for a much grander purpose. And they're getting ready to find out what that is, or begin to find out what that is in Vertigo. One character you haven't mentioned yet is Rook, probably because of his position in the story, and I appreciate that. But Kate develops an attachment to Rook, as is right and proper in the story. And a lot of this Sidewinder is Kate dealing with her demons to a degree. Rook is going to have to face some of his in Vertigo, and his are a lot more difficult. And they play into Kate's life and Thomas's life in ways she doesn't suspect yet. So.
Very good. So Vertigo is the second book in the series, right? Mm-hmm. And then is there a third book? You mentioned another book. Is that going to be the third?
Yes, Halcyon. The title of the series is the Halcyon Files, and the third book will be Halcyon.
Okay. So what are the Halcyon Files? As much as you can give away, as much as you can say without giving too much away.
Sure, I can do it this way. The Halcyon is a poetic name for the kingfisher, and it comes from a Greek legend that I won't recite here. But basically, the Halcyon, this particular queen, was turned into this bird because her husband died at sea, and she loved him tremendously. And in her grief, she was asking Zeus to return her husband's body. And eventually he turned them both into kingfishers, or halcyons, and gave them, she would lay her eggs on the seashore, on the cliff, but because the kingfisher lays its eggs in the middle of winter, the surf was always really bad and it would wash away her eggs. She begged Zeus for mercy. And eventually he did. He gave them what came to be known as the Halcyon days in the middle of winter, which was a small period of good weather. And so Kate is, in her own way, a Halcyon. And so as far as the period of good weather, the resolution, that comes eventually.
And let me ask you, too, about your title for the first book, Sidewinder, because I think it's such a unique title. In fact, when I saw that pop up on Amazon, that was one reason I reached out to you, because I thought, wow, what a great title. And the cover and everything really pulled my attention. Where did you get the idea for that title, and what does it mean in terms of the Halcyon Files series and really what goes on in the first book?
Okay. I would love to answer that question directly, but I can't, because that comes later on to give you. In Sidewinder, you get a partial explanation for what the Sidewinder is. You begin to find out a Sidewinder is a snake that doesn't move in a normal manner. You know, it moves very quickly, but it doesn't behave as you would expect. And if you expect it to act in a certain way, you may get bit. And that's exactly the way the Sidewinder functions through this series, because though we leave the title behind, the idea continues to develop and may or may not cost some of the main characters their lives. we will see.
Yeah. The book is excellent because of all the things that you've talked about, and we've tried not to give too much away.
Sure.
We'll whet the appetite of the audience, but not give too much away. But there's just so much going on in this book. It's just such an excellent story for all the things and the reasons that you've talked about. I want to ask you about putting this book together, and then putting together Vertigo and this entire series. How long does it take you from the time you start drafting till the final manuscript is completed? And then how do you go about the editing and the revision and the publishing and all that sort of secondary part of the process? What's that like?
Sure.
Too?
Okay. It depends on where exactly I am in my career at that point, because it depends on what editors I'm working with at the time and all that sort of thing. But my personal process, a book like Sidewinder usually takes me about 9 months to write, give or take. I just finished the next one I'm releasing, which is actually beginning another series, is Brimstone. It's 160,000 words long. That took about 10 months to do. And then after that, there'll be several rounds of revision. The revision in total will take about that long, a little less than that long again, but I'm working on multiple writing projects at that point. The editing doesn't consume as much time in total, but it does take about as long because I start other writing projects, because if I couldn't write, I'd wither up. So,
yeah, I understand. Is it hard sometimes to keep all those different stories and plot lines and circumstances at the same time going, or
It's really not, believe it or not, because it's a different world. First off, as I mentioned earlier, this is a mystery. The ones I'm working on, two of the other books I'm working on are fantasies, so the worlds are distinctly different. But not really, because the characters take such a life that once you get back into the story and you start interacting, it's like different friend groups that you have. You get in one group of friends and everybody has a certain dynamic and a way they interact and a way they behave, and it's always beautiful in its own way. So, your job as a writer is never really to create beauty. It's simply to take that beauty that exists among the interactions of these people that you love and then capsulize it, put it on paper for people to enjoy whenever they want.
That's great. And I love that philosophy. I think it's an excellent philosophy, not just for this book, but for writing in general, and why writers are so passionate about what they do and readers are so passionate about what they read and finding authors that they like to read. In our final moments, Dan, if anyone wants to reach out and get in contact with you, if they want to get a copy of Sidewinder or talk to you about your upcoming books that you're working on, where can they reach you, and how can they get in contact with you, and how can they get a copy of Sidewinder?
Okay, you can get a copy of Sidewinder on Amazon. You can either get softcover or ebook, either one. And you can get a hold of me at, I'll give you my company email address. It's daniel.s@whitetidepublishing.com. So, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I do a lot of writing workshops and that sort of thing in local grade schools and high schools, and I spoke to a writing group just the other night, so I love to talk, love to hang out with writers and readers.
That's great. And I will point out, too, that you do have an excellent unit guide for teachers or for book clubs that need some discussion questions or character background. You provide all that through the White Tide Publishing website, which is
I'm glad
excellent.
you mentioned that. Yes, it's a fully developed unit plan for Sidewinder, WV Next Gen compliant for high schools. It's quizzes, tests, everything, reading questions, everything the teacher needs is basically a semester designed around Sidewinder, laid out right there. It's for free, downloadable on our website. So www.whitetidepublishing.com.
Daniel Foster has been our guest here today on Chapters, talking about his latest mystery book, Sidewinder, which is a fantastic book. A lot going on, great characters, twists and turns everywhere, a great setting, just everything you would want in a mystery. Congratulations on its publication, and thanks for coming on Chapters to talk about it. And as you keep releasing more in the series, and as you start your new series, we'll definitely have you back on to talk more about how things are going.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
And we want to take a moment to say thanks to Charlotte McCoy and the staff and management at Empire Books and News for providing our taping space today, as well as other on-site support and assistance. We encourage you to stop by Empire Books and News, get a copy of Daniel Foster's book Sidewinders, and also, if you want to check out books by the other author, editor, and publishers we featured here on the program, they're available for sale right here at Empire Books and News. Plus, if you like magazines, Empire Books and News has the largest selection of magazines in the tri-state, all that available to you right here at Pullman Square at Empire Books and and News. And if you've got a question, comment, or suggestion about the Chapters program that you've watched today or any Chapters program you've seen here on Armstrong Television, we want to hear from you. The email address is popping up right there at the bottom of the screen, so be sure to use that and send those comments and feedback coming. We appreciate that so much. And if you'd like to go back and watch a previous episode of Chapters, we've made that available to you through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube, and the address is also right here at the bottom of the screen. From there, just click on the Chapters tab, and you can find over 80 interviews from authors, publishers, and editors from West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky that have been aired on our program over the last 3 years. So if you want to go back and check out another program that you've missed or a different one that you maybe haven't seen for a while, we've made that available to you through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube. So we encourage you to do that as well. And if you're looking for an opportunity to hear some writers read their work, or if you want to share some work that you've got that you're working on that's either published or non-published, Empire Books and News sponsors a Writers Can Read open mic event the third Monday of each month all year long right here at Empire Books and News. All you need to do is show up with a 10 to 15 minute piece of something that you've written or something that's in progress, and you'll have a chance to have that read and get some feedback from an audience of readers, writers, and folks that just love to hear literature and love to hear it in action. So we encourage you to stop by. That's the Writers Can Read event, third Monday of each month right here at Empire Books and News. That event runs from 7 until 8:30, and if you've got questions about that program, you can call Empire Books and News 304-529-7323. And that will do it for us this time on Chapters, but please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.